Hello and welcome in to Off the Bench here on a Wednesday, the midweek hump day, as they say. I'm Reed Mouse. We've got a show for you. We do have a show for you today. In Stone Shields, my producer today, we're going to be going over some UC stuff. Man, how silly is that? The paper bag thing, Miami's response. Miami, once again, wins again. Undefeated. One of the 4 remaining undefeated teams in the country. Rank them already. And then, of course, as per usual, on a Wednesday, we will have a mailbag. We'll try to get someone on here tomorrow and Friday for the show to kind of spice things up as we wind down the week. But Stone, how are you on this lovely Wednesday?
Doing great, Reed. Doing great. Some big-time NFL news. You were all over this a while ago. You threw it up to me.
Thanks.
I can't remember exactly when this was.
It's about midpoint of the season.
Yeah. You were like, is there a world where all these coaches in the AFC North get fired, or is there a world where all these coaches in the AFC North get fired except for Zach Taylor? And that's what happened. How about that?
I think at one point I asked you I asked to rank, because I did this like 2 different times. I said, like, what's the over-under on how many AFC North coaches are gone next year? And then I said, what's the rank of, like, the most likely to get canned and the least likely to get canned? And to be honest, I don't recall how we placed it. I think maybe this is just revisionist history. I feel confident that we would have said that Zach Taylor would probably be the most comfortable to keep his job regardless if things really, really went haywire. John Harbaugh might have been the safest spot. But even him's gone. Even he is gone. 3 out of the 4. And finally, the Cincinnati Bengals have the best coach in the AFC North. He's the only coach in the AFC North, but we have the best head coach in the AFC North, Zachary Taylor. We'll get into those things. I checked the mailbag. There are some questions regarding that. We'll talk about that later on. But today, we wanted to talk about college basketball here in Southwest Ohio. And I think we can all agree that for the most part, it's been an underwhelming year, and mostly because the 2 teams that kind of carry the load here in Cincinnati, the University of Cincinnati Bearcats and the Xavier University Musketeers, they're not good. They're not good. Xavier was anticipated to be bad, and they are. One of, if not the worst team in the Big East, though they got a win over Providence this weekend, and they continue to be well coached despite their poor talent. But I think we all can agree that they're probably going to end up at the end of the year below 500. They're probably going to end up at the end of the year near the bottom of the Big East. So we will see how they unfold. I think they are looking okay as we go to the future. Then you got the University of Cincinnati, who had somewhere between a $10 and $12 million roster, which is high-end money in college basketball. They have Wes Miller in his 5th year, which that's been the barometer for when success needs to start falling in Cincinnati. That's when Mick Cronin started to really turn things around. And they'd been kind of waiting on UC and Wes to, despite their what appears to be good rosters every year, they were at one point, I think, ranked 12th in the nation last year. They've been unable to make the tournament. And this year, it's gotten worse and worse. UC lost to Xavier. They continue to lose these close games. The stat came out. What are they? 3-51 in games in which they losing at any point in the final 5 minutes, which is just a godly stat. I mean, just god-awful. In a fireable offense. And the ensuing anticipation is that Wes Miller will be without a job or will not be with Cincinnati. We saw the cracks with his presser last week following the loss to West Virginia. And then this week, picture floated around of someone wearing a paper bag at Wes Miller's coach's show at Montgomery Inn. And then one of the many fan counts that follow UC basketball said, you know what, this Wednesday against Colorado at Fifth Third Arena, we're going to band together and wear brown paper bags to show our disgust towards the current state of the program. Wes Miller is out, needs to be out. John Cunningham needs to be without his job. And then Miami jumps in the ring and says, hey, you don't need to wear brown paper bags if you come up to Millett Hall, as they got their 18th win of the season yesterday. And in part, I don't know how big. I truly don't understand. I don't know how big of a stink this whole mess is. Like, I don't know how many people are going to show up to Fifth Third Arena. According to some tweets I saw today, everything's still on. People are like, hey, this is a terrible look. These players don't want to see their fans in brown paper bags. How are recruits going to want to come to Cincinnati if this is how the fans treat? And once again, I don't understand. I don't know how big this is going to. They say it's on. We're going to see. I don't know if 3 people are going to show up in brown paper bags. I don't know if 100 people are going to show up in brown paper bags. I don't know if the entire Fifth Third Arena is going to show up in brown paper bags. People at Paycor Stadium have done this before. People at Great American Ballpark have done this before. Showed up when things aren't good. Brown paper. It's kind of a common trope. But to organize an event where everyone comes in doing this, I mean, with all due respect, what are we doing? What are we doing? The school, I guess what I'm saying is you're trying to make a point. You're trying to make a statement towards your team, towards your school, towards the entire program, the entire athletic department. They are well aware of where the program is. John Cunningham, the athletic office, Wes Miller, you heard it in his voice when you never tell Wes Miller that you feel for him because you get your head ripped off. But they're well aware of fan sentiment right now. They don't need however many people are going to show up to the game wearing brown paper bags. In the only statement that you are going to create if enough people show up. Once again, if 3 people show up, it's not a big deal. Same way that it happens at Paycor Stadium. But if 3-4 rows, 50 people show up and they're taking up some serious room, they show them on the broadcast. The only statement you're saying to the world is that this is a clown show. This is a circus. And I mean to be that blunt about it. The school, Cunningham, the athletic department, Wes Miller, the team knows things aren't going well. Wes Miller knows his job's probably out. So what statement are you trying to make? Because the only statement you will make is this is a circus. This is a clown show. I don't know how else to put it other than that. You are embarrassing what is a great program. And you could argue, well, Wes Miller's embarrassing this program. 3-51, 3-50, whatever the stat is currently up to in games where they're trailing at any point in the final 5 minutes. Haven't made a tournament in 5 years. That's embarrassing, and no doubt it is. But at least there's some pageantry to it all. When showing up in brown paper bags is hilariously juvenile. And not even in a fun sports fandom way. It's just like, what are you doing? What is the statement you're trying to make? Because I can tell you the statement that you're trying to make, you're not going to accomplish it. And in fact, you will just embarrass the school. And not in a way that promotes change. Kind of, I don't want to say irreparable damage, but this will be talked about if this is some big event. And I don't know. Like I said, 5 people could show up. 10 people could show up in brown paper bags. There's a lot of stink. There was a lot of discourse on the internet about it here in Cincinnati about it yesterday, which if there was a lot of people planning on doing it, they'll probably back off just based off the discourse yesterday. But if a lot of people show up, a full section, 100 people, enough people to where it's on the broadcast and, pictures start floating around the internet, it's just going to be an embarrassment for the fans. Stone, we talked a little bit about this before the show. And you actually brought up the question is like, how big is this? Like, right? Like, is this actually going to happen? What is your take? What is your opinion on the planned brown paper bag game for UC tonight?
You can do whatever the heck you want. So if you really want to go out there, throw the brown paper bags on, it's well within your right to go out there and do it. I would not encourage that behavior. We talked about, it's a little bit different if a few guys show up at Paycor Stadium with a brown bag on than if you're trying to organize this whole thing. And just to be clear here, as far as organizing, I think all we know is that this Barstool Cincinnati account threw out some tweet that they wanted to do it. I don't think there was anything beyond that that's like, all these groups are getting together and doing this.
Right.
So I'll check the game. I don't know if I'll watch the whole game, but I'll peek there at the beginning, see what the situation is in the student section, see how many people are doing it. I wouldn't be one of those guys that throws a brown paper bag on. I would imagine the people that do it would be students, and at that point you're kind of just embarrassing your university, so I probably wouldn't do it. But these people are ticked off. These people want change. And, I tell you who will take notice of it. John Cunningham. Will it result in him making a decision to move off their coach? No. But he'll see it, and he'll have an opinion on it. I can assure you that. So, well within your right to do whatever the heck you want. If you want to show up with the brown paper bag, you can do that. I wouldn't do it. Van Exel, some other ex-players, Cincinnati legends have come out and been like, stick with us here. Don't do this. You don't need to do this. But, I'm fascinated to see how many people show up like that.
It's I'm catching up on the chat, and I'm reading and I'm hearing what you're saying. And I want to make that point known. If you want to spend your money, buy a ticket, show up to the game, you can wear whatever you want as long as it's not obscene, right? Like, as long as it's legal. Like, you can do whatever you want. It's your money, it's your life, it's your time. I guess I'm speaking out loud when I say it feels like you're trying to convey a message to the team, to the organization, to the program, to the athletic department, to the school that we're not happy with the way things are. And I will tell you that they're well aware. They are well aware. And I don't know if doing this is the best way of going about it. I'm not going to sit at Fifth Third and be like, hey, take off your brown paper. You can do whatever you want. I'm just telling you that it's going to create a circus around the program that is probably not needed. I think Wes Miller's already well on his way out. I think that his job, I don't know if it's going to be before the deadline of April 1st when he can buy out for an extra $5 million or after it. And there's a question to be asked about if he is truly gone, what do you do? I would say maybe just punt on next year, save up that money, tell whatever coach you bring in, be like, hey, we're going to take a year, kind of recoup some of the money. We spent some money. We had to buy a coach out, and then we'll really go after it in a year. Maybe you can even spend some of that basketball money on the football team and try to get that ball rolling in a Big 12 that isn't very good. There's several avenues to go. But I'm not sure if the brown paper bag thing is the best avenue. It seems silly. It seems silly in a way that isn't needed at this certain time. And in a season where it seems like every single week there's something new to complain about. There's something new dragging this team down. A team that is very talented. A team that I do think will get a big one at some point this year. That maybe just don't. But we'll see. We'll see how big of a thing this is. Because like I said, if it's 5 people showing up, that's whatever. That happens all the time. Paycor Stadium, that happens. It's happened in Reds games. It happens. And and I'll actually admit, when it's 1 or 2 people, it is kind of funny. Like it's like, all right. They're unhappy. But if you have an entire section doing it, then you're just like, man, did the Ringling Brothers come to town? What's going on here? So we'll see. When you got guys like Nick Van Axel, like proud alums of the program, legends of the program, saying, don't do this, sometimes you should listen. But once again, we will see. We will see. I just think that it's probably not the right message to send. All right, let's talk about the Miami Redhawks. They win another game, undefeated, one of the 4 remaining teams in the country, undefeated 18-0, And as we talked about earlier this week, not ranked. Not ranked in the Associated Press or the coaches poll. To where I have a simple question when it comes to this Miami team and why they're not ranked. Do I think the Miami Redhawks, who have played NAIA schools, D2 and D3 schools en route to their 18-0, do I think they are one of the 25 best teams in the country? No, I do not. No, I don't. And I think we all can agree that that's a pretty safe take. You stack them up one against one, they're not a top 25 team in this country. That being said, when has the Associated Press poll ever been that barometer? It has never been that barometer. It is oftentimes just a ribbon or a badge amongst teams playing well. And you see it in football all the time. You'll see a team that, a James Matt or whatever, be like 13-14. A team that's undefeated in the Sun Belt. They get in the top. Do they think they're a top 25 team in the country? No, they do not. They played in the Big Ten. If they played in the SEC, they'd get demolished almost every week. They might be able to sneak out one win or two. The Associated Press has never truly been about who is the best 25 teams. So if we already understand that, if we already know that, then why the hell are we safeguarding this poll by not putting Miami in for being undefeated in a season where teams didn't want to play them because they knew they were going to be good? It just doesn't make – just rank them. Just rank them. I don't know what else to say. It's never been about who the best 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And if it was, the AP poll in football and basketball would be 10 Big Ten teams, 10, 5, 10, whatever it is, that take the best conference, and you would never have these, Mountain West basketball teams in the top 25. You never would have these Sun Belt football teams make the top 25. It's never been about that. It's been about, at the top it is, who do we think the best team in the country is? But oftentimes, the 20 to 25, it's just, hey, this team's 15-2 in a decent conference. This team's 18-0. And I don't know what else they've won 4 to 5 games where they've been underdogs. They continued to blow teams out. Just rank the Redhawks. Your take, Stone, on the AP poll not allowing the Redhawks. Like I said, they're not a top 25 team. They are not one of the 25 best teams in the country. You can't even argue it. But this poll has never really been about that. It's been oftentimes just acknowledging, hey, this team's playing pretty well, because it looks pretty cool when Miami has 25 next to their name.
Yeah. I mean, you're sure they're not a top 25 team?
I'm pretty confident.
Okay.
I'm pretty confident.
Okay.
You don't seem so sure.
Yeah. I'm not going to sit here and know, for sure that there's some team that's 24-25 that they're better than. I don't know that for sure, but they look pretty good. I understand they're not, playing high-level competition, but they're not just beating teams. I know Central Michigan's terrible, but they're taking them out to the woodshed. I mean, that's a 40-point differential there. So absolutely rank the Redhawks. Scoring the basketball at a high level, shooting the rock. Travis Steele, friend of the show, doing a tremendous job. So, yeah, rank the Redhawks, and hopefully they can keep this thing going. Look, if they keep winning, eventually they will be ranked. So I'm sure this is, Steele alluded to them having a chip on their shoulder. They obviously feel like they should be ranked, and eventually they will be ranked if they keep winning. It's only a matter of time.
Yeah, someone in the chat just got on me. They said Power Fives didn't want to play Miami because they knew they were good, and he was saying, he's like, come on, better than that? Listen, that's not my opinion. That's not my opinion. That's coming from Travis Steele's mouth himself. He's saying he tried to schedule Power 5 schools. We've heard teams do this. When Xavier lost to Marist, when they lost to Santa Clara, the question is why did Xavier play this game? These teams understand, these Power 5 teams, these Power Conferences teams, understand that a loss to a non-Power 5 school looks bad. So when these teams get good, they stop scheduling them. When they understand that they have a good team coming out, they stop scheduling them because a loss looks way worse. And it's really interesting to see the future of where college basketball is headed, because teams like Miami is a good case study for the future of these mid-major teams, to where like, all right, if no one of note will play them, what if they just played really bad competition? Like they got bye wins. They played bye games against Division III, NAIA schools, and D2 schools. What happens then? And they just waltz through that competition. Can they get into the tournament? And we've had that question before. How many losses is Miami allowed before they're an at-large bid? Paul Fritchner, friend of the show, Rebound Rundown, said, listen, if they lose more than 2 games, they're not going to make it an at-large bid. It's been 26 years since since the Mid-American Conference has gotten an at-large bid. You have to go all the way back to Wally Zerbiak's Miami Redhawks. And I saw someone else, a bracketologist on Twitter, throw this up today. If they go undefeated, what kind of seed are we looking at for Miami? Like, are they a top 4 seed? I don't know. I think Stone, you threw out earlier, you're like, are they like an 8 or 9? Because we genuinely don't know. It'd be hard to imagine you get the bracket out and it's Miami, however many games they play, 38-0, 8 seed. No, they'd be better than that. But we'll see. Listen. The Miami Redhawks absolutely deserve to be a top 20, a ranked team. Because the AP poll has long lost its luster, has long lost the pedigree of are these the top 25 best teams in the country? Miami, I don't think is. If they played, you could stack them up against the best teams from the SEC, the Big 10, the Big East, the Big 12, and they are not a top 25 team, but they're 18-0. And the AP poll has long been a pageantry thing. It's long. Those final few teams in the poll have long been just they're playing well. It's a good story. And I don't know if there's a better story in college basketball right now than the Miami Redhawks. And I hope they get a new arena. I hope they make a nice, intimate arena like some of these other MAC schools have, and we can start getting that thing packed, and Travis Steele continues to keep it rolling, and Travis Steele doesn't go anywhere in the near future. All right, it's Wednesday, 10:30, best part of the week. At least my favorite part of the week. It is the mailbag here on Off the Bench. Stone Shields, I think we have 5-6 questions in the mailbag as we check the DMs, as we checked our email. Remember, you can get this in. Just DM us, email me, message me. I don't know. Some of you guys got my number. Just send it in. Mailbag. First mailbag question, Stone.
All right, here we go. First mailbag here on a Wednesday. Long caller, first-time listener. If you had to rank the current trajectories of major Cincinnati sports teams, Bengals, Reds, Xavier, UC basketball, UC football, how would you rank them? And that comes in, I can't believe I'm saying this name on the show because that's not how we get down here, Reed, but this comes in from Kendrick Duckworth.
Ooh, you're not a K-Dot fan?
No.
You're not a K-Dot fan?
No.
I'm sorry for you. Kung Fu Kenny. Love me some K-Dot. How would I rank the current trajectories of major Cincinnati sports? That is the Bengals, Reds, Xavier, UC football, UC basketball. 5 teams. Well, the first and foremost, like currently, I don't think any of them are trending the best. But it's hard to put anyone other than the Bengals at number 1 simply because they have one of the best players in the sport in Joe Burrow, and they have one of the best wide receivers that the sport has ever seen in Jamar Chase. Yeah, there's a lot of questions. They haven't made the postseason in 3 years after making it, but still, in a city that doesn't have a lot going for it right now, the Bengals are still pretty clearly trending. I don't think we could see justifiably the Reds competing for a league championship in the next few years. We can see that with the Bengals. I don't think we can see UC basketball trending for an Elite Eight or a final in the next few. We can see that with Bengals. Same with Xavier. Same with UC football. I mean, UC football started the season 7-1, and we're like, are they going to make the Big 12 championship? Well, they didn't win another game for the rest of the year with the highest end quarterback in the transfer portal on their roster. So I would go Bengals 1, and this is where it gets hard. And I think this is where you're going to see some bias come out. Because I think the team with the best trajectory might be the worst team of the 5. And I think that's Xavier. I really like what Richard Pitino's doing. Yeah, they're not good this year. Terrible even. But with the current state of the Big East, and there's not many great teams in the Big East. I mean, UConn's there. St. John's really good. Villanova's getting good again. But I think we can realistically see this Xavier team make the tournament, win some tournament games next season, where they're going to be putting more money in the NIL. So I really like their coach, and as we know in college basketball, coach is king. So I'll put them 2. 3, I will put the Cincinnati Reds. The Reds made the postseason for the first time in a full season since 2013 last year. They have one of the true great rotations in the league. It's a top 10 rotation. It goes 7 men deep. Their lineup has a lot of things to be desired, which we talk regularly on this show. But if you turn around, if you get Ellie De La Cruz back to MVP Ellie, if you get Matt McClain back to 2023, Matt McClain, if you have just a few things in that lineup fall the right way, we can be looking at an upper 80s win Reds team. Now, you got to squint your eyes a little bit to see it, but this team, I don't think would shock the world if they win 87 games next year. It's not where they're projected, it's not where they're headed, but I don't think it'd be the craziest thing. Then I would put UC football 4th and UC basketball last, because I don't know. Obviously, Satterfield is coming around. They played better. They just lost their quarterback. And then I don't know where UC basketball is going. And they've probably, out of all these teams, have the most talented roster comparative to their sport. But, man, I just have no idea where UC basketball is headed. Stone, where do you rank these 5 teams?
So real quickly, you were
Bengals, Xavier, Reds, UC football, UC basketball.
Okay. Bengals clearly won. Frustrated, defense stinks, organization, mom and pop, all the good stuff that we always talk about. You got Joe Burrow, you got Jamar Chase, clearly won. You can win the Super Bowl any given year. I get you just won 6 games, but the expectation with Joe Burrow going into each and every year is win the Super Bowl, regardless of where he's at in his career. Bengals clearly won. And then going to 4 and 5, it's clearly UC, right? Do you want to argue football 4, basketball 4? That's fine. I'll flip what you had. I'll say basketball is a notch above football just because there is talent there. Very difficult, more of a difficult conference in basketball than football. But I think they should be better than they are right now. Football, right. I just don't see them getting near the top of that conference. So I'll say basketball 4, football 5, and then the 2 and 3 is certainly fascinating. You could argue either way. You let your bias come out and said the Xavier Musketeers. For what it's worth, I think Xavier's in a very good spot with Pitino. Some of the stuff we've seen from him is tremendous to this point. Muskie's in action, of course, tonight. And I think a lot of coaches in his spot would not have as many wins as they currently do right now. He deserves a lot of credit. And we talked about it a lot on the show. Going into next year, they're going to get more funding towards their program, and they're going to have a chance to be a threat. I'm not going to put them up there with UConn, but a decent threat in the Big East. But I'll say the Reds are at 2, and Xavier is at 3. I mean, if they keep the rotation where it's at, they can compete with anybody. We know that. And unfortunately, they haven't added any offense. But if the guys that they have take a step in the right direction, they could be in a good spot. So I think there's a world where the Reds have a lot of upside this year. Unfortunately, there's a world where they miss the playoffs and, are eliminated with a couple weeks left. But I think there's a world where, I'm not predicting them to win the Central, but they are by no means out of it. I feel way better about them winning the Central than certainly the Cardinals after the Arenado trade, and the Pirates as well. Brewers are always going to be good, and your Cubbies have a really good team, but I think the Reds
Buccos have had a decent offseason.
You keep pushing this. It's still the Pirates, Reed. Yeah,
and what is the difference between the Pirates and the Reds in the last 12 years?
The Reds are a better team.
In what metric?
Playing baseball.
Okay, like we're talking wins. Okay, we'll talk about playoff advancement.
Advancing? What's that?
That's not a word. Advancement. You know who's advanced in postseason more recently? The Reds or the Buccos?
Was that you're talking about the wild card in 13? Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah. Do you know who's had a 90-win season more recently?
Yeah, who's that?
Buccos.
But we don't have to do that. Come on. They lost way too many games to the Pirates last year. That can't happen. But come on. Don't do us like that.
I think that there is a punching down factor. Reds, when they talk about the Buccos, think they are punching cliffs down. I think they're punching multiple rings down the ladder.
Yeah.
When I think that is more level than you realize.
You think so? You think so? Well, how about, not to go completely off the rails here, but your comment yesterday about the Cubs having the second highest floor in all of baseball? You want to bring that to the fine folks here at Off the Bench?
Yeah. Do you want me to explain it?
Sure.
All right. Okay. Yeah. Sure. We'll do this. I said yesterday that I think that when it comes to lineup, when it comes to positional players, I believe that the Cubs have the second highest floor. Not the second highest ceiling, the second highest floor in baseball behind the Los Angeles Dodgers. Reason that I think this, and I'm going to use WAR as a guiding metric for all this. You look at Nico Horner, Dansby Swanson, Alex Bregman, Ian Happ. All four of those players have been at least a 3.5 WAR player for the last 5 years. You can almost guarantee Ian Happ's going to have 3.5 WAR. Nico Horner's been worth about 5 wins a year. Alex Bregman, 4 wins. Dansby Swanson, 4 wins. Okay, so those are all incredibly high floor players. Then we start looking at Pete Crow Armstrong, center fielder. Pete Crow Armstrong, incredibly volatile player. But he's the best defensive player in the entire sport. He's coming off a 30-30 season. His floor is so high because of his defense and running. But if he gets anywhere near the offensive output that he has, we're looking at one of the best center fielders in the sport. Okay, what about the other 2 guys that start? Michael Busch, 30 home run season last year. First baseman. I think that you might be trending a little down. I don't think we're going to see the same output, but still a silver slugger candidate, as is Seiya Suzuki, who also had 30 home runs last year. And then our designated hitter on paper is Moises Ballesteros, who I know you guys don't know who that is.
What's he done? Nothing.
He's projected to have about the same rookie season as Sal Stewart. He's ranked higher in terms of catching prospects than Alfredo Dune. So that's why I think they're. Do you got a team that you think has a higher floor?
Philly.
Think Philly?
Yankees.
Guess we'll disagree. I think those ceilings are much higher. I think our floor. There's a lot of players in the Phillies and Yankees rosters that could be downright bad. I don't see a single player, maybe Moises Ballesteros. I don't think there's a single player on the Cubs starting lineup that could be bad. I think they will all be good. I don't even see a player that could be average. Like Miguel Amaya, Carson Kelly, they could be average. You could maybe convince me that Ian Happ finally trends backwards and is average. But almost everyone in that lineup is good. There's not much great. I will admit that. There's not much great, but they have the highest floor. All right, next mailbag. Unless you want to ask me more baseball questions.
I know, you needed to get that off your chest. So,
I did.
Yeah, there we go. We'll revisit that going forward, certainly. Okay, here we go. Indiana has absolutely waltzed through this college football playoff. Reed, you recently argued that Cignetti is one of the greatest hires in college history. I think what he is doing couldn't be accomplished without the NIL and transfer portal. Do you agree? Also, how do you think this team stacks up to 2019 LSU? And that comes in from another esteemed hip-hop artist, Andre Benjamin.
What's your favorite Outkast song?
What's that one? What did I say? They're killing me in the chat right now. When Dana
Roses,
was on,
Hey Ya.
Say again.
Roses.
No,
Hey Ya?
what's the most famous one?
Hey Ya.
No.
I mean, that's their most famous song.
No, it's not. Give me another one. About
Rosa Parks, AT Aliens, Bombs Over. I Like the Way You Move.
No.
Those are all like their most popular songs.
There's one that you're not saying that I'll say here in a second after I look it up, but you can go ahead on this question here.
All right, I want you to look it up, and I want to tell me. If
you said Outkast, right?
I did. Okay, I said Outkast, and I said their most popular song. My favorite, for the record,
Miss Jackson.
Oh, okay. I did miss one. That's fair. I did miss one. My favorite Outkast song, for the record, is Spody Odie Dopalicious. I think the greatest Christmas song of all time is Players Ball. Kirk Cignetti. I said that I think he's the greatest college football hire because I've never seen in any college sport a true zero to hero story like I've seen with Indiana football. They have statistically, historically, the worst college football program. Perennial losers. And in 2 years is BTAing teams. And you could say this would never happen 15 years ago. This could not happen without the transfer portal and the NIL. Okay. I mean, Amazon wouldn't be the company that they are without the internet. Does that diminish them as a company? If Amazon started in 1890, would they be the company they are? No. I don't care. I don't care the medium of the sport. What I'm telling you is that this guy was hired in the NIL era. In this era, it wasn't like he was like it wasn't like just crazy. Like, this was the sport in which he was hired to compete in, and he's doing it he's turned around a program the likes of which I've never seen before. Do we need to see more sustained success? Absolutely, absolutely. But I am absolutely enthralled by what Indiana football has done. And if you sit there and go, this would never happen without the transfer portal and NIL, congrats. You can compute things at a you can see things as they're happening. Congrats. I don't care. He's doing it in that era. He's doing it in the era. He's with the same the entire sport is playing in the NIL transfer portal era. So I don't think it negates it. If anything, it shows how great of a hire that was, as he was hired at the exact time that this transferred into this. This sport transferred into that. Even adding to how great of a hire that is. Do you think that that's a major pushback on Cignetti? Like when people are like, this wouldn't have happened 15 years ago. You can say that it's great what he's doing to Indiana, but like this would never happen without the NIL or transfer portal. I don't care.
Yeah.
This is the sport now.
Yeah.
And he's doing it in this sport.
Yeah. No, I agree. That totally. But it's true. It wouldn't have happened back then, but who cares? It's happening right now, and he deserves a heck of a lot of credit. But the second part of that, how do they stack up to 19 LSU, reader?
So if they played a football game, 2019 LSU would probably wipe the floor. No. Just because they have like Indiana has been, let me put it this way. Indiana has been as dominant as that 2019 LSU team is. But I think that, once again, going back to where 6 years ago you could stack NFL talent on top of NFL talent on top of NFL talent. Like, we've seen so many players flourish from that 2019 LSU team. I think Fernando Mendoza is going to be a great NFL quarterback, and without knowing their entire roster. Like, there's going to be players that play in the NFL, no doubt. But I just think talent level, that 2019 team's probably a little better. And that's, like, also, once again, going to the current era of college football now, things are spread out. Things are spread out a little better. So I would take 2019, but you don't seem to be quite there yet.
I think it's a conversation. I think there's a narrative out there that kind of like what you said, LSU 19 would wipe the floor. Obviously, it's all hypothetical. It would never happen. But this Indiana group, man, they're the real deal. And hypothetically, if you could match up these two teams in a game, the LSU team would be a slight favorite. But could Indiana win that game? Absolutely. I think they could. It's time that they deserve or get some of the credit in which they deserve. They got to finish it off. They need one more. I fully expect them to do that. But when you watch them, I kind of get flashbacks to the 19 LSU team, and I've said this a bunch on my show. I'm not comparing Mendoza to Burrow, but just the sense that, he's not going to blink, regardless of how big the stage is or regardless of what down it is or how big the moment is. He's not going to flinch. You had that feeling with Burrow in 19, and also he doesn't miss either. The guy is surgical with the football. He is so accurate down the field, to the boundary, the check down, the slant. He can throw all the different routes out on the football field, and that kind of reminds you a little bit of Burrow there as well. So I agree. LSU team probably a little bit better, but it's time to have that conversation if the Hoosiers win on Monday night. But the Cignetti stuff, what he's done is tremendous. Does it happen without NIL? No, but that's the era we're in. So give him his credit, give him his flowers. I got no issues with that.
All right, fair enough. By the way, the Cubs lineup in terms of projected WAR for this upcoming season finishes third in the National League. third in the National League. So that's their projections, behind the Dodgers and behind the Braves. Ahead of the Phillies,
that was a
ahead
weird
of the
year for Atlanta last year.
Listen, Atlanta's probably going to be fine.
Yeah.
Atlanta, that's a team that has a much higher ceiling than the Cubs. Like, the Cubs don't have players like Ronald Acuna. Like, PCA could be like that. But, yeah, they have the third highest projected lineup behind the Dodgers and the Braves, ahead of the Mets. And significantly, they have this what I'm seeing is PECOTA, which is what people, that's like the most popular projection. The Brewers have a projected better lineup than the Phillies this year.
Yeah.
So Padres, Giants all have projected better lineups than the Phillies this year. So we also don't know if like JT Realmuto is coming back. So
did you just say PCA could be like Ronald Acuna? Is that what came out of your mouth?
I did.
Oh.
Except for better. He's a much better defender. He clearly couldn't do like the 40-40 season or what was it, 40-70, but that's near the peak of what we saw from PCA last year offensively. Like, I don't think he'll ever be a perennial 30 home runs, 40 stolen base guy, but his defense is just so amazing that he doesn't need to do that. PCA is great. And I'm sorry that everyone hates PCA because he dresses different. Similar to how everyone hates Caleb Williams because he paints his nails. I'm sorry that bothers you, Stone. I'm sorry that PCA dyeing his hair bothers you.
Or that he strikes out too much?
He does strike out a lot. I have seen him strike out on balls that have hit him about 4 to 5 times. He does do that quite a bit. Gotta love an aggressive king. Next question.
All right, here we go. Okay, now we're talking. One of the greats here, one of the all-time greats. Mike Tomlin is fired. John Harbaugh is fired. Kevin Stefanski is fired. Good call by you guys for seeing this way back at the midpoint of the season.
Yeah,
shout out Reed Mouse. Do you think all three will be coaching next year? And that comes in from the one and only Dwayne Carter.
You with the Carter 4 or the Carter 3 guy? I'm with the Carter 3 guy.
4 if I had to pick. All right.
I like the Carter 3 more.
But just incredible.
Yeah, Wheezy. Yeah. He probably should have laid off the lean at a younger age because I don't know how much computing power is still going on in that brain of his. But Wheezy back in the late 2000s was great, early 2010s. And even before that, the Carter 2, I haven't given that one enough credit, but the Carter 3 is my favorite Lil Wayne album. Yeah, all three coaches. I don't know what to tell you, Lil Wayne. Maybe the lean got a little too much in the brain, the cranium. But yeah, all three coaches are going to be coaching next year. The only one that could you see Mike Tomlin taking a year off?
I could.
Like, could you see him just being like, you know what, I've been at it for a long time. I want to see, and I think that he's competitive. I think he loves football enough to where like he could say that, and then he'll be chomping at the bit next year. But I could see Mike Tomlin going, you know what, let's just and truly taking a year off, not doing the studio work, not doing any of that. So that's really. Kevin Stefanski will 100% have a job. John Harbaugh will 1,000,000%. If you can go above 100, a 1,000,000,000% have a job next year. And if Mike Tomlin wants one, he will have one. The question is, I guess, does Mike Tomlin? I could see Mike Tomlin taking a year off. Is that really the only question here? Is when it says like, will all three of these guys have a job? They're all coveted.
Yep.
They're all coveted. Will Mike Tomlin take it off? And who would you rather have, Mike Tomlin or Kevin Stefanski? As the head coach of your team?
Wow, that's a good question. Real quickly, I agree. The only one that potentially might not is Tomlin. There's been rumors about him doing TV. I think everyone talks about the Tomlinisms, right? He's always got great quotes. I think he'd be very entertaining on TV. Don't think it's an out of the park thing necessarily, but I think there's a lot of upside for him there if he decides to go that route. Stefanski or Tomlin, that's interesting. It depends on where you're at as a team. I think if you have a quarterback in place, i.e. the Giants, I would say Mike Tomlin. But Mike Tomlin doesn't want to go anywhere where there isn't a quarterback in place because he's done that ever since Big Ben stepped away. So if it's but then again, Dart's a younger guy and certainly could benefit a lot from Stefanski. So, yeah, there's no question Tomlin's the better coach, but if you have a younger quarterback or you're looking to figure out who your quarterback is, I would lean Stefanski. But no question that these three guys are the top three, candidates. And this is huge for the Bengals. Like that, we're talking about this, it's big, whatever, Steelers, Ravens. Like the fact that Harbaugh and Tomlin are not there and the Browns were already cooked, but now they get rid of the one good thing they had going for them besides Myles Garrett. Like, you made the joke that Zach Taylor's the best coach in the division. Yeah, because he's the only one right now. But
Sure.
if they don't make some good hires, like he very well could be when this thing is all said and done. So this really is significant as it relates to the Bengals. Hate to already be talking about next year, not the playoffs, but the Bengals look like they're in the driver's seat kind of in this division.
Yeah, I mean, we got to see who they hire, right? We got to, like, if the Ravens make some, which I don't know what would be a crazy, amazing hire, with LaFleur staying in Green Bay, like that would scare me, right? If the Ravens got a hold of LaFleur, you're like, all right, well, that's pretty intimidating. But that's obviously not the case. But yeah, as it currently sits, the Bengals might have lucked themselves into being the favorite in the AFC North, which would be, I guess, welcomed with a third-place schedule. We'll see. I mean, they've got one thing to fix this offseason and no distractions in their way. So that's the hope that I'm choosing to believe in. Side note, because I feel like every time I finish answering one of these mailbags, I got to talk about baseball again because he fired me up about baseball. Did you see NBC is going to be doing Sunday Night Baseball?
I did see that, yeah.
Did you see who they're gauging to do the studio show around that?
No, is Tirico doing the play-by-play?
I haven't seen that.
Okay.
I haven't heard him call baseball, I don't think.
I haven't either.
So, and he's great. Like, that would be great. But who they're slating to do the studio show apparently is Clayton Kershaw,
Ooh.
Joey Votto,
Whoa.
and Anthony Rizzo. That's a great studio show. That's a great studio show. Like, truly would be incredible. All three of those guys have great personalities. Votto's a little quirky, I'd say. But the other two are fantastic. I think that's going to be great. Like, I'm really excited for Sunday Night Baseball. And I hope NBC, and I think they will, do a fantastic job this year. I think the Reds are on it a few times. Yeah. I think they play the Cubs at Wrigley Field once or twice on Sunday Night Baseball.
Do you think Joey would be good on TV?
Joey Votto?
Yeah. The GOAT?
I think yes.
Okay.
To answer the question, yes. Because I think he's, in terms of understanding hitting, I don't know. I can't think of anyone that honed his craft quite like Joey Votto. Like that dude seemed like he was consistently like obsessed with being the best hitter ever.
Yeah.
And I know we didn't see a whole lot of his personality, and we got till the end of his career where it kind of blossomed, and then you're like, this guy's kind of a weirdo in like the best way possible. So I think Votto, there might be some growing pains, but I think he'll be quirky enough. I don't know if I want him for a full 9.
Yeah.
But in a studio,
okay.
I think he'd be good in a studio.
Yeah.
Like Kershaw or Rizzo, I think would be good on television, period. But Votto I'm not sure if he'd be great being in a 2-man booth.
Right.
Calling a full 9. If it was a 3-man booth, then yeah, that'd be great.
If we get that kind of behind the scenes to hitting, I definitely think it would be great. Because that, to me, is like Tom Brady's gotten better, but like the whole thing was that, okay, people call this guy the GOAT. Yeah. Like, I want to get behind tell us what it's like being a quarterback, what's going through your head, and you don't get that at all from Brady. So if you got that from a hitting perspective from Votto, I think that would be pretty cool.
Do we think Barry Larkin's going to get the color job for the NBC Sunday Night Baseball? Okay. All right. I like how you didn't want it on the record. All right. Next question here in the final few minutes of the show.
We're heating up here with these people sending us in questions. Remember, just fire in those DMs, email us, whatever. And we've got some pretty big names here, and this is another great one. The Chicago Bears pulled off an incredible comeback on Saturday. Some say it was because of Caleb. Some say it was because of poor kicking from the Packers. What are your thoughts on Caleb Williams as a quarterback? Is he elite? Comes in from a Lions fan, Marshall Mathers.
You an Eminem fan?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I don't know if I like Eminem.
Huh?
Eminem kind of stinks.
He's got what?
Kind of stinks.
What do you mean he stinks? You don't have to like him. What do you mean he stinks? He's not talented?
He raps fast. Congrats.
Yeah.
Congrats. I mean, he's the John Ross of rappers.
Oh. No, he's not.
He's much better than that. But listen,
Not Afraid. You can't tell me that didn't fire you up as a kid. Getting ready to go to a Baden baseball game, you and the boys bumping Not Afraid. Come on.
Sometimes I forget the age gap between us, and then you're like, in terms of trying to convince me on Eminem's greatness, you throw out Not Afraid, which is a fine song.
Was that did I get the year wrong there?
No, it's just like, I mean, I thought you were going to talk about like the Marshall Mathers LP, Encore, like some of the earlier stuff, and then you're like, and I realized like, oh yeah, you are much younger than me. So
Yeah,
that song,
12,
that song
15.
came out when I was like 13, 14.
That was about what I was going for.
I know, but like,
That was pretty good. I know there's about 12, 15-year age gap here, but that's pretty good.
I turned 30 this May, and it's been brought up a lot how I turned 30 this May, and I hate that. I hate people talking about. All right, let's talk about this Bears game. Let's talk about Caleb Williams. I think Caleb Williams is clearly not there yet. Let me say this. When it comes to that game, both things are true. The Bears do not win that game if the Packers special teams team does better. Point blank, done. The Bears also don't win that game if they don't have someone with the firepower, the horsepower of Caleb Williams. I am a Caleb Williams believer. I am. It was a rocky first year. It's not as consistent as you'd hope from someone that was as lauded as high as Caleb Williams. But I think when 5 years from now, we will look at Caleb Williams as one of – we talk about quarterbacks in tiers. Oftentimes you got to ask yourself, can this guy win a Super Bowl? Caleb Williams can win a Super Bowl. He can. Could you see some of these – like Dak Prescott's a great quarterback. He's a really good quarterback. Can you see Dak Prescott holding that Lombardi trophy? No. No, you can't. I mean, he might do it this year, but like, can you close your eyes and imagine like a Bo Nix holding the Lombardi trophy? No, I can see it with Caleb Williams. That's the kind of player he is. So, is he elite? Not yet, but I think he will be. Your take? Because I know you hate Caleb Williams.
Hate's a very strong word, Reed. I don't hate many people here in this world, but I'm not ready to crown Caleb Williams, right? The question, is he elite? No, he's not elite. Can he potentially be elite? Yes. Is he reaping the benefits of having Ben Johnson? Absolutely, right? The two quarterbacks that everyone throws out there about guys that, had a rough start as far as their landing spot, Sam Darnold, Baker Mayfield, right? If Caleb was in one of those situations, would it look this way? Absolutely not. We saw how it looked last year with Eberflus. Didn't look good whatsoever for Caleb Williams. So, look, all the talent's there, the arm talent. I don't love, his leadership qualities. I think there's some intangible stuff there that isn't great personally. But, he's a couple wins away from the Super Bowl. You got to give him credit for that. And if he's holding that Lombardi trophy, like you said, you eventually have to crown him. But he's definitely reaping the benefits of having Ben Johnson. And, look, there's, I get it's year one for Johnson. But as far as, a quarterback being in an offense, there's not really. Like, it's McVay, it's Shanahan, and it's Ben Johnson. Right? Of course, Andy Reid there as well. But Ben Johnson's the real deal. And with all the talent that Caleb Williams has and the run game stuff, it's working out well. But if he keeps showing up only in the fourth quarter, that's not going to be a recipe to beat the Rams, certainly.
All right. We'll see. We got one more.
Another good one. It was a rough start, but this last one is great. The Reds have made marginal moves to better their roster. I'm upset because the Cubs and Pirates have made big moves. Where do you think the Reds stack up in the NL Central next year? And that comes in from the double G, Calvin Brodus.
Snoop Dogg, Tom's friend. Doggy Style. Great album. Great album. Where do I think the Reds stack up in the NL Central? They are clearly in the second tier, like the Brewers, based off the success they've had recently, and the Cubs, the success they had last year, and the few moves that they've made this offseason. Obviously, they've lost Kyle Tucker, but they brought in Edward Cabrera. They brought in Alex Bregman. They've bolstered that bullpen. They're gonna project around 90 wins, probably high 80 wins. So where do the Reds stack up? I think that one of either the Buccos or the Reds will surprise teams. I think that this team, once last year the NL Central had 3 teams make the postseason. I think that there will be at least 3 teams in the chase in September. There might even be 4, to where vying for that final wild card spot, and it's going to be between the Buccos and the Reds, wouldn't that be electric? If they were playing each other for the final week of the year. I haven't looked at the Reds schedule. Playing each other the final week of the year. Winner goes home. Winner goes to the postseason. Loser goes home. Hopefully the winner of that, the final wildcard team, doesn't have to go to L.A., Chavez Ravine for 2 games and get massacred. Hopefully they get a more approachable thing. The Reds are going to make some move. I'm not as pessimistic as some Reds fans are when it comes to their lineup and just staying put. The Reds are going to make some move in the next month and a half to bolster that lineup because they have no choice. They have to. They cannot go into next year with the lineup as it is. They will bolster that lineup, and it's probably not going to make you happy. It's not going to excite you. It's not going to move the needle. It's not going to fire you up, but it's going to happen. They're going to make some move that'll make them marginally better as they consistently do, and then we'll see. And then you're just going to be relying on guys to play better. You're going to rely on guys to, like Matt McClain, as I mentioned. It's got to be the interior young guys. It's got to be the guys from inside the franchise to get better. But give me the Buccos over the Reds this year.
Look, if I'm ranking them, I'd put them at 3 behind the Brewers and the Cubs, ahead of the Cardinals and the Pirates. I think there, as I mentioned earlier, is upside. They can win this division. They absolutely can win this division. But could they come in last in the division? Hard for me to imagine that they would do that behind the Pirates, but I guess they could come in last too. So that's what makes this year so intriguing, right? I mean, you're going to be tuned in because you don't really know fully what to expect. You know the rotation's good, but how are the bats? Are they going to get off to a good start? I mean, there were some guys that got off to a fine start last year. Trevino, right? That was real fun there for a second when Stephenson was out. But are some of the younger guys going to come along a little bit more? Is Noelvi Marte going to be able to build off what he did last year, which was, a really good season? Is Ellie going to be able to really turn into that, can't miss guy? He's already an incredible player, but offensively, can he take that next step? So lots of intrigue. Upside is very high. You like talking about ceilings and floors. I think the floor is pretty low, but I think the ceiling's pretty high. So it's going to be a very compelling year. You would think right in the middle is probably where you would guess. But there's absolutely a world where they just win this division and finish ahead of the team with the second highest floor, according to you.
I love how you hate that. And I they are, without a doubt, let me put it this way. You can argue and have a good argument that the Cubs have the second highest floor in baseball. I don't know if you'd win that argument, but you could certainly sit there and argue it to where, like, if you did that with the Reds, no one would argue with you because it just sounds like you're a crazy man. If I was like, the Reds have the second highest floor in Major League Baseball, you'd be like, okay. And you put a brown paper bag over your head, you go down to Fifth Third Arena and cheer on the Bearcats. But listen, I just saw someone in the chat, and I love getting fired up about the Cubs. Said the Cubs are pretty much fool's gold, in my opinion. They brought in the guys they brought in pretty much replaced what they lost, and they slumped hard down the stretch. Final thing I want to talk about is they slumped hard down the stretch. Gosh, I wonder who slumped really hard down the stretch. Could it have been the guy that they got rid of? Could it have been the guy that they were a little frustrated in his injury and what he was bringing to the team every single day, and that's why they went for a high-character guy in Alex Bregman? Could it have been Kyle Tucker, the guy that really struggled down the stretch? Now, PCA struggled too. But, listen, this team, yeah, they lost a 4.5-win player in Kyle Tucker, but they just replaced him with one of the best third basemen in the sport. And they have great defense. They got some more bat-to-ball guys. They just got a starting pitcher that throws 99 miles an hour. Yeah, their starting pitching doesn't have Hunter Green or Nick Lodolo or Paul Skeens or Jared Gott.
Yeah, I feel like you think that you've got the Reds rotation and the Cubs offense, but you have the Cubs offense and the Cubs rotation.
Here's what I'll say about the Cubs. What did you get mad about me for saying about Andrew Abbott?
You were disrespecting him. Said he was a 3.
Okay.
He's an all-star.
When I look at the Cubs rotation, 7 guys deep. It goes 7 deep. It's really deep. They don't have any bad pitchers, starting pitchers. Would you say Shota Imanaga's a bad pitcher?
No, but
Matt Boyd.
No.
Jameson Taillon. Edward Cabrera.
I don't know who that is.
That's the guy we just got. There's 90 really good for the Marlins. Justin Steele.
Yeah.
I mean, he was a Cy Young Award finalist 2 years ago.
Yeah.
The point is while they don't have any high-end guys, they don't have any guys that are just going to stink up the mound every time they go out there. Like, we're not going to have Ben Brown starting 20 games this year. It's not a high-end rotation. There's no doubt about it. It's middle to behind middle of the pack when it comes to rotations in the league. It's just there's no bad guys. Like, there's not a bad pitcher in that rotation. When Jameson Taillon's your 6, you're doing something pretty well. All right, have a fun show on Stone Shield Show. You got anybody coming on?
Not today. I got guests tomorrow and Friday, but not today.
All right, we went over top. See you guys. See you tomorrow. Off the bench. Love you guys.
All right, here we go. Welcome into the Stone Shield Show. My name is Stone Shields. We are here. We are live. It is Wednesday, January 14th, a couple weeks into the new year, the year of our Lord, 2026. Fired up to be here on a Wednesday with you guys. Just you and me throughout the duration of this show. Do have a couple of guests Thursday and Friday, but just me and you today, and lots of stuff that we need to discuss. Huge news in the NFL, huge news in the AFC North, and I think directly relates to the Cincinnati Bengals as Mike Tomlin has stepped down. I've got my thoughts on that, and Reed Mouse and I speculated about at the midpoint of this year. We're kind of looking around going, is there a world where these coaches here in the AFC North, a team in which, or a division in which I picked 3 teams to make the postseason, obviously clearly wrong on that front. Is there a world where 3 of these coaches, maybe even 4 of these coaches, are not back in place next season? And who would have thought? Here we are. Stefanski out, Harbaugh out, Tomlin out, Zach Taylor remains in place. And the Bengals currently have the best coach in the AFC North, best coach in the division, Zach Taylor. How about that? And I do think there's a world. Obviously, there's only one coach in place right now in the AFC North. That's the joke, if you missed that. But I think there's a world where if these hirings don't go perfectly, for Cleveland and Pittsburgh and Baltimore, where you could be going into week 1 next year and say, you know what, Zach Taylor might actually be the best head coach in this division here at this point. So we'll talk about Tomlin. Kind of felt like it had run its course. Certainly view this situation a little bit more different than I view the Harbaugh situation in Baltimore, but we'll talk about that. We'll talk about how it impacts the Bengals there as well for our Bengals segment. Also, we'll go through the Reds catchers. We're going to kind of take a look at position by position here as we get closer to spring training and pitchers and catchers reporting. And speaking of catchers, that's the position we're going to focus on today. The Reds currently have 3 on their 40-man roster, and Tyler Stephenson is going to arbitration. Reds haven't done that with the player since 2022. Stephenson's going, and Ashcraft is going to be going there as well, relief pitcher for the Cincinnati Reds. So we'll talk about that. Stevenson's going to be back, obviously. This is his final year of team control for the Cincinnati Reds. I'm kind of sitting here going, where you're at, small market team, the funds that you have, I'd be thinking about extending Tyler Stephenson personally, but we'll have some Reds catcher conversation as well. We'll talk about the Cincinnati Bearcats. They're back in action as they look to be above 500. They're 8-8, I believe, right now, and will dip below 500 if they lose tonight. Colorado is the team in which they're playing. Colorado has a solid record, but they haven't really knocked off any top-of-the-line teams. Cincinnati at home favored by 7.5 points last I looked, and Xavier in action as well. But we're going to talk about the paper bag thing. There's an account out on X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it, basically saying, yeah, show up to the game and wear a brown paper bag. I have some thoughts on that. Some Bearcat alums, most notably Nick Van Exel, coming out saying, don't do that. Don't do that, guys. Come on. Let's stick with us here. It's only, January 14th, middle of January. Stick through it with us with this team, and we'll have some thoughts on that. The game tonight, what needs to happen, and just a huge game for Wes. I don't think there's any coming back from this, but if he wants to just quiet the noise down a little bit, he's got to win games in which he's favored, particularly if they're playing on their home floor. So we'll talk about the Cats a little bit. Great night of college hoops last night. Iowa State, they were all the way up to number 2 in the rankings, which credit to them. They were beating everybody, deserve a lot of credit. They're a good team, but a top 3-4 team, that's a little bit aggressive. And Kansas was able to knock them off. Kansas unranked. They've lost some games, but, Darren Peterson missed a lot of time. Consensus is that he'll be the first overall pick in the NBA draft. Played really well for them last night. Also had some other players play really well for Kansas last night as well. Kansas feels like a team with the roster that they have, especially if Peterson's out there. They're a top 25 team. So I wasn't shocked that this happened, but real true domination from Kansas in this game. And, I think Iowa State at 2 was a bit extreme, if we're being completely honest there. UConn picks up another win. They are hot. They are a really good team. We'll talk about them, Dan Hurley, a little bit. And how about Houston, man? After last year, you lose Cryer. You got to rely on some freshmen here going into this season. And Houston's the real deal again. Probably not as good as last year, but Kelvin Sampson might be the best coach in all of college basketball, if we're being completely honest. They beat West Virginia, who, of course, beat Cincinnati, but they beat the tar out of them. And that Houston team is really, really good. Florida gets back on the right track. Alabama gets back on the right track last night. LeBaron Feinlein went off at 30-plus in the game. It's a bad Mississippi State team, but some good college basketball last night's Texas A&M, Tennessee, double overtime thriller there in that one. And a couple of local games tonight, of course, the Bearcats in action, Xavier in action. And how about the Miami Redhawks? We'll spend a little time talking about Travis Steele's group, friend of the show there, of course, as well. They're undefeated, and they're still not ranked somehow. And I think that's just an abomination. I'm a little bit biased. Graduated from Miami University, but they're undefeated. They're beating the crap out of all these teams. Certainly think they should be ranked at this point. We'll talk about that. And how about this? A little PGA Tour conversation, as the tour is back tomorrow. They didn't have the Kapalua tournament of champions, some renovations there at that course, and some flooding issues, I believe, caused that tournament to be removed. So the season starts tomorrow, the Sony Open in Hawaii. And usually, the first tournament in Hawaii, get a lot of, top-of-the-line players, and then they fly back, and the Sony Open doesn't really have a loaded field. But no Scheffler, no McIlroy, but you're going to get Jordan Spieth in there. You're going to get Ben Griffin in there. You're going to get some really solid players in this field, I think more solid than years past, as they look ready to get back in the swing of things and ultimately get ready for the West Coast swing. But we'll talk about Brooks Koepka. He's coming back. That's great for the PGA Tour. Needed to happen. And, he's going to face some repercussions for leaving, certainly some financial penalties that we'll talk about, but certainly an overwhelming good thing that Brooks Koepka is going to be back on the PGA Tour here in a couple of weeks. So that's kind of what we got on tap for this show. I would invite everybody to hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already. On our way to 22,000 subscribers here at Chatterbox Sports, and the plan here is to keep rolling with this show each and every weekday going forward. The Bengals season is over. Still lots of Bengals conversation to have. We'll talk Reds. We'll talk basketball. So certainly looking forward to keeping the program rolling here at Chatterbox Sports. But help us out. Subscribe to the show. It's free, of course. Daily content here at Chatterbox, all for a grand total of $0. So help us out. Subscribe, like the stream, subscribe to the podcast. Those numbers going up ever so slightly here at the show. So if you missed the show, if you can't be available with us live, totally get it. It's a weekday. It's 11 o'clock. You're busy. The podcast, that's why the podcast exists. And whenever you have time, we appreciate listening to our podcast there as well. Let's talk about the news of the day, though. Mike Tomlin, he steps down as the head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I would be fascinated to know exactly how that went down, right? Was it a situation where Tomlin walked into the room and before anybody could say anything was like, hey, I'm stepping down? Was this a situation where he kind of went into the room and the organization was like, hey, we'll let you, publicly say you're stepping down, but you're not going to be here next year? I don't know. Fascinated to know, but this one doesn't really surprise me. The Harbaugh thing shocked me, but it kind of felt like in Pittsburgh this thing had ran its course a little bit. And look, Tomlin's a legend. What he was able to accomplish, has that Super Bowl to his name. Things kind of got a little bit stale here late. I don't fully fault Mike Tomlin for that, right? If you're in a position in the NFL, and whenever Big Ben retired, it wasn't recent here at this point. It's been several years since Roethlisberger has been out of the game. And if you haven't been able to figure out the quarterback position for all that time, that's an indictment on the organization, I think, not really the head coach. And they had a quarterback this year in Aaron Rodgers who could still play at a high level. And if he was surrounded by great pieces, could they have, won playoff games with him? I think so. But, the organization, Omar Khan, this front office, man, they are really behind the times. And you look at these front offices across the National Football League, and this Steelers organization is this proud organization and 6 world championships, what have you. It's kind of renowned as, one of the best organizations in football. You talk about, teams like the Packers and the 49ers and the Eagles and the Ravens. And, you kind of threw the Steelers in there just based on all the history of this organization. But, the reality of the situation is, they've had quote-unquote winning seasons the past few years, but, you talking about being a threat to win a world championship? Absolutely not. So, thing kind of had run its course. Tomlin gets to leave on his terms, which he absolutely deserves. It will never be accomplished again, I don't think. In this day and age of pro football, to have a job for 19 years, basically 20 years, got the job in 2007, had immediate success, picked up, right where Cowher left off, really, and wins that Super Bowl early, and, goes to another one there as well, and he, funnily enough, faced Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers, and certainly, won some playoff games with Roethlisberger, and it's just been a struggle ever since then for Mike Tomlin. Here at this point. So this certainly helps the Cincinnati Bengals, right? As I talked about when we first got going with the show, is, you're in a division, you have Zach Taylor as your head coach, and you look around that division, and you go, well, we got Mike Tomlin twice a year, we got John Harbaugh twice a year, and Stefanski's won Coach of the Year twice. Kind of feels like you enter all of those 6 divisional matchups with the worst head coach and the worst coaching staff. Well, I think there's a real world where that's not the case for Cincinnati next year going forward. And it'll be fascinating to see how Pittsburgh handles this process, who they bring in. It kind of feels like they want a tough guy in there. That's just Pittsburgh, right? Are they going to hire Mike McDaniel? No, that's not going to happen. Are they going to hire some offensive guru? Maybe you can make the argument that they should. That doesn't feel like what they're going to do, right? I think Brian Flores, that's the type of guy that kind of would check out. Robert Saleh, he just kind of screams Pittsburgh Steelers, right? Maybe a Jeff Hafley type of guy, defensive-minded, tough guy. Kind of feels like is going to fit the bill for what Pittsburgh wants going forward. But I think they're at a spot right now as an organization where they kind of were in purgatory the past few years, to be honest with you, because it was they were good enough to the point where they weren't getting a top-of-the-line pick and, fully restarting, but bad enough to the point where it was okay, maybe you get to the postseason the final week of the year, but you had really no chance of winning a postseason game. I thought this year, I thought they were going to beat Houston. went out on a limb and said that, but they lose 30-6. But you look at some of these previous years, they didn't have a chance going into some of these wild card games. So they had a real chance this year, and ultimately it didn't work out for the Pittsburgh Steelers. But where do you go as an organization here at this point? Because you look at their roster, it is old, right? It is really, really old. Cameron Hayward's been a great player for a really long time, right? Well, he's making a lot of money here at this point. Is he going to continue playing pro football? TJ Watt, who was an outstanding defensive player and still is an outstanding defensive player, but kind of a fleece job from Watt and his agent to get that size of a contract that he got with the age that he is currently at here at this point. And it was a down year for TJ Watt. Absolutely no way around that if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers. Did he have some injury stuff, the punctured lung, what have you? Yes, absolutely, but he didn't look like the TJ Watt that we're used to seeing over the course of the past few years. And when that's your highest paid guy, that's a problem, right? And you bring in Jalen Ramsey, who, okay, that's a fine acquisition, right? But then you have to move him off that safety spot because the reality is he's not very good at corner anymore. And, I think Porter's a really nice piece there on the outside. And Highsmith, good player, and maybe you have something in Jack Sawyer, who you took in the later rounds of this draft. But you got a lot of work to do. And, when you look at the Steelers roster, it doesn't look like a roster that, a really, innovative front office comes up with. It looks like a roster that you assembled on Madden because you thought it would be fun. Like, oh, yeah, let's bring in here Aaron Rodgers. And look, I would have brought in Aaron Rodgers, too, if I was the Pittsburgh Steelers. They had no other option. What are you going to do, start Bill Howard or Mason Rudolph? No, bring in Aaron Rodgers. But you bring him in, and, let's trade for DK Metcalf. Okay, that's something you do in Madden. Or, Jalen Ramsey, he's had, he's a really popular player. He's had a great career. Let's bring him in. Let's pay TJ Watt, right? It's just not innovative. Like, Philly's not doing that, right? And Baltimore's not doing that. San Francisco's not doing that. That's something you do with your buddies on Madden because it looks cool, right? You shouldn't do that in an actual NFL front office, and it's cost them because they really have no way forward here at this point. Who are you going to build around? Again, I think Porter's a nice piece on the outside, but he's a corner. Like, that's your guy to build around. You got questions on the offensive line. Your right tackle that you picked early in the draft, yeah, he has some upside, but he was horrible in the game against that front for Houston. And, Jalen Warren's a good player, Kenneth Gainwell, but are those long-term pieces here in Pittsburgh? Probably not. So you really need to bottom out if you're the Steelers. And it seems like, gauging on what their fan base has said, like that they're ready to do that, right? There isn't a world where they have a winning record next year. I don't think that's going to happen because you need a full restart. You need to get some draft picks, move off some guys. I think you should cut DK Metcalf, certainly, as that was just a fleece job, as we talked about yesterday here at the show. From John Schneider in Seattle, where it's like you give him a second-round pick, and then you extend DK Metcalf and give him a ton of money. Just a huge mistake there. And if I'm the Steelers, I'm looking at making a change with Omar Khan because he has not been good as the GM of the Steelers. And honestly, at this point, I'd rather be in Cleveland's spot, as crazy as that is to say out loud. If you kind of remove the logo and remove the helmet and just look at the teams where they're at, I would rather be Cleveland here than I would rather be the Pittsburgh Steelers. So this is great news for the Cincinnati Bengals because if you bring Tomlin back, or if Tomlin decides to stay, they would find a way to win 9-10 games and be a problem for you in the AFC North. I don't see Pittsburgh being a problem whatsoever here this following year. I think you can say it's a 3-horse race in the division, and Cleveland's one of those teams. So really it's a 2-horse race between Baltimore and Cincinnati, and they, of course, are going to be looking to have a new head coach in place. So if you're the Bengals, I get it was a frustrating year, an incredibly frustrating year, but how this offseason has shook to this point, the ball is bouncing your way, with moving off of Harbaugh, which I contend to believe is a huge mistake from Baltimore. It'll be fascinating to see how they replace him. And then losing, Tomlin steps down, I don't think that's a huge mistake, but they're not going to be competitive next year. I just don't think there is a way in which they are. Is Rodgers going to come back now without Tomlin? I would be shocked. He went on McAfee before the year and was like, it's a good chance that this is it. One thing that you can say a lot of things about Aaron Rodgers, and I think some people questioned his love for the game at one point. You can't question his love for the game after what he did this year, fighting through the injuries to come back. There was no guarantee they were going to make the playoffs, and then they win some games there at the end, lose the game against Cleveland, but are in a position after the missed kick, and he gave it everything he had. And, $10 million is a ton to me and you, but to Aaron Rodgers, $10 million, that's not why he played. He played because he wanted to play for a renowned organization in Pittsburgh, have an opportunity to get that bad taste out of his mouth that he had with the Jets, and for the record, he absolutely did, right? I mean, he won the division, went to the playoffs. Aaron Rodgers, his expectations are a lot higher than that, but he didn't want to end his career with how things ended in New York because that was a complete mess. I would expect him to be done. Probably should be done. He at times proved throughout this year that he can be great. But, without guys that can win on the outside, without a solid defense, without a really good offensive line, he's just not that guy anymore. And as someone that loves watching him play, I'm sad that the last game we saw of Aaron Rodgers is him getting whipped 30-6. But now, with the head coach leaving, is he going to go to his third team or his fourth team, of course, if you count Green Bay, just to, keep playing? I don't know. Maybe he will. But, he's one of the best quarterbacks to ever play, and he's already, on his third team. And the past few haven't been great. Won the division, of course, this year, but it just kind of feels like he's done. And Pittsburgh just needs to kind of bottom out here and then build for the future. Don't see them being competitive this coming year at all in the AFC North. And we'll see what they do at the quarterback spot, right? Joe Flacco, it's funny, is a name that gets thrown around. Does he want to complete the lap of the AFC North and be a member of the Pittsburgh Steelers? I think actually it would be kind of what they need, to be honest with you. Just a bridge guy that can go in, start some games, pick up a handful of wins, and then figure out what they're going to do at their position moving forward. Or do you give Bill Howard an opportunity? 6th-round pick out of Ohio State, national champion winning quarterback. Does he get a chance to, take the reins next year and see what you have in him? And then if you lose a bunch of games, it's not the end of the world because then you'll probably have a high draft pick. But Steelers are in a tough spot. Are they going to trust Omar Khan to oversee this offseason? I guess they are, but in my opinion, that is a significant mistake. And then the question, of course, becomes, where does Mike Tomlin go at this point? And, immediately, it's funny. As Reed was asking me this, would you rather have Harbaugh or Tomlin? It's very fascinating. I don't know is really the best way I could say it. I would lean Harbaugh. To be honest with you, I would lean Harbaugh, but those two guys are immediately top-of-the-line candidates here in the NFL at this point for these job openings. And, there's going to be a ton of people, obviously, that want the Ravens job, but there'll probably be a lot of people that want the Steelers job just because it is the Steelers. I read somewhere that, the Steelers job is immediately the best job. No, it's not. I think the Giants job is a much better job, and I think you could argue the Falcons job is a better job, and I certainly think the Baltimore Ravens job is a better job because the Steelers are just a complete mess right now, and their front office has not set them up well at all. For the future. The only way this could have worked for the Steelers is if they would have won a couple of playoff games for Aaron Rodgers. And it's like, well, we had a chance here, and it didn't work out. But I don't think you won the division. There's something to be said with that. But when you went in on Aaron Rodgers and you went in on this old roster, it was kind of like a year-by-year thing for Pittsburgh. It wasn't building for the future, and that's going to cost them here moving forward. But where do you go if you're Mike Tomlin? There's been a lot of people out there that say, he's interested in TV. I think Mike Tomlin would be really good on TV. Would it be a studio thing? Would it be he's in the booth calling games? I don't know. I've heard people say he should, go to Amazon with Al Michaels, but Herb Street, in my opinion, has done an incredible job. Herb Street's the best there is, in my opinion. So if you're Amazon and you made the switch from Herb Street to Tomlin, I think that would be a huge mistake if they did that. But, they wanted a coach in the past. They kind of went all in on McVay, and he was like, no, I'm going to keep coaching. Apparently they had interest in the Niners GM, John Lynch, there as well, and ultimately that didn't happen, and it went to Herb Street. But to remove Herb Street from that spot, I think would be a huge mistake. And then, would he be a better analyst in the booth or a better studio pregame show guy? I don't know, but it's safe to say that would be entertaining, right? You have all the Tomlinisms. He's got a way with words. Certainly, it would be very, people would tune in to see Mike Tomlin, and he's clearly got a lot of knowledge for the game there as well. So does he want to just say, you know what, I've had enough. I won a Super Bowl, won a ton of football games. We can argue Hall of Fame, probably, right? I mean, he won all these games, never lost, and that is huge. Never had a losing season. Look at the Chiefs right now. They're picking before they have a top 10 pick, right? Nobody would have thought that. Mahomes, Andy Reid, Kelsey, the Chiefs, regardless of them aging or whatever, would have that bad of a year. But it sometimes happens. The Ravens have had bad years in the past. Harbaugh's had losing years in the past, right? I mean, Andy Reid in Philadelphia, too. These really good teams sometimes have losing seasons. Belichick had losing years. To never have one, especially with all the uncertainty at that quarterback position since Ben left, is crazy. And, he deserves a lot of credit for that. So TV certainly is another avenue. Or does he want to jump right back into this thing? Does he want to jump right back into this thing and be a head coach next year? And everybody is going to want him. He's going to have I don't know necessarily if it's the pick of the litter. It'd be one team removed. If not, like I don't know how people view it. Would you rather have Tomlin? Would you rather have Harbaugh? Kind of a coin flip. I would probably take Harbaugh if I'm picking between the two. But, I think if you're Tomlin, you want to go somewhere that has a quarterback plan in place. Now, a big reason why these jobs are open is because there isn't a quarterback plan in place. But there's two that have it in place, or one certainly, and that's the Baltimore Ravens. That would be a shock, right? Imagine that, right? All the battles that those guys had, and then if Tomlin went to Baltimore, I would be shocked if that happened. But the quarterback's in place there. And you could argue that the quarterback is in place in New York. I don't think all of us are like, yes, it definitely is in place with Jackson Dart, but I think it's more in place there than, at some of these other stops, right? Certainly Arizona, they're in shambles. The Dolphins appear to be in shambles. The Titans have a rookie in Cam Ward, but has he shown as much as Jackson Dart? No, absolutely not. But, I think the Giants would be a very interesting fit for him. I think he would work very well in New York, but they are interested, of course, in Harbaugh as well. The Giants is one, and then Miami, I think, could certainly also be one. I've talked about this a lot with Harbaugh and just kind of where my head would be personally. If I have an opportunity to go down to South Beach and kind of that be the end of my career, living in Florida, I'm sure he has a house down there somewhere in the offseason, somewhere warm, right? I think, he's been up in Pittsburgh and just kind of the tough city. Like, does he want a bit of a cold weather? Does he want a bit of a change? Maybe, but maybe that's just the type of guy he is and wants to continue to be. But I think Miami would be a little bit intriguing. And I think, from a football perspective, I think the Giants and the Falcons are the most intriguing, of course, besides Baltimore. So it'll be fascinating to see what he does. He's the top 2 candidate immediately. I think his value could even go up if he left for a year, right, and then came back, because then there's this kind of, this aura around him of like, oh, Mike Tomlin, the great Mike Tomlin, and there's, he hasn't been in the game for a while, and all we know is about him winning all these games and going to the playoffs, and maybe he wants to take a year off, kind of reset, and then see what jobs are open next year, because we know jobs will be open, right? There's always going to be, 6 to 8 to, 9 open here at this point. There's always going to be a bunch open, and he certainly would be a top candidate next year's cycle there as well. But significant news directly impacts the Cincinnati Bengals. I'm not, that's not hyperbolic. Like, that is the truth. This is very, very significant for the Bengals that you don't have to play John Harbaugh and don't have to play Mike Tomlin twice a year. I mean, you went into those matchups with being outmatched from a coaching perspective. And I don't just mean head coach, so just from a staff perspective there as well. And that's an advantage you'll now have going forward. And we'll continue to monitor these openings and see where these guys go. Guess there's a chance, Harbaugh could end up in Cleveland, or I guess a chance Tomlin could end up in Baltimore. But there's a real world where they go into week 1 next year with the best head coach in the division. I know a lot of people don't like to hear that, but, if you had a couple questionable hires, like, do you really trust Cleveland to get the hire right? Probably not. What if McDaniel goes to Baltimore, right? And then Bob Saleh to Pittsburgh. Like, you feel pretty good about Zach Taylor being your guy with Cincinnati here at that point. But huge NFL news, and we'll continue to monitor it. Pretty amazing that we have this many job openings at this point. 3 in the AFC North, besides, of course, the Cincinnati Bengals. Let's transition here to a little bit of Reds conversation. The folks over at Reds Daily, Cincinnati Reds, Sports Illustrated, are kind of breaking down their positions here as we get closer to spring training, pitchers and catchers reporting. Thought that was a good idea, and that's a good way to kind of get back into the swing of things. Obviously, Chatterbox Sports is your one-stop shop for the best Reds coverage. Nick Kirby, Trace Fowler, Craig Sandlin, Mike Hart, and others do a tremendous job with that. So we don't fully dive into the Reds here on this show, but we will as we can continue to progress. My thought process is, if you want Red stuff, you're in the right spot, but you might as well, hear it from Nick and Trace and these guys. But as we get closer and the Bengals season obviously is over, we will get a little bit more heavy into some Reds coverage here at the show. But catcher is the position we'll start with. They got 3 guys on the 40-man roster here at this point: Tyler Stephenson, Jose Trevino, and Ben Rortvedt. And he was picked up off of the Dodgers. And, with the Reds, you ever going to pick somebody up like, oh, my goodness, like, this is the greatest thing ever? It's going to be like, okay, the numbers aren't great, but there's some potential here. There's a ceiling here that we believe that we can encapsulate and get close to, right? That's kind of, I guess, the hope with him, but he's your third catcher on your 40-man roster. Of note, Tyler Stephenson is going to arbitration. And essentially they're going to, I don't know if it's like an actual, like, court hearing or whatever, but basically his people in the Reds are getting down and they're like, we think he should make this much money. The Reds think he should make that much money, and then the court will ultimately decide. But he's under team control. This is his final year. He is under team control, and I believe they're like feuding over like $200,000 or something like that, which to you and me, that's a lot, $200,000. But for a professional sports team, I get it, Cincinnati. But come on, we seriously couldn't figure this out. But it's not something that typically happens for the Reds. This hasn't happened since 2022. But he's going to arbitration. Graham Ashcraft also going to arbitration there as well. And Tyler Stephenson, to me, we talk about Matt McClain being kind of the X factor for Cincinnati this year. Like if he can get back to that bat that we saw when he was a rookie, this team has a chance offensively. Well, Tyler Stephenson, the Reds ask him to do a lot because you look at catchers across Major League Baseball, and there's really not a ton of catchers that are asked to do as much as Tyler Stephenson. Obviously, Cal Raleigh, of course, is a major exception, but they ask him to be one of their best bats. And at times throughout his career, he has lived up to that. And unfortunately for Cincinnati, the consistency wasn't there this past year. And he dealt with the injuries, right? And we'll talk about Trevino here in a second. But they need him to, get on base a heck of a lot more, have those extra base hits, occasionally put the ball out of the ballpark there as well. And the biggest concern with Stephenson was that he wasn't really a guy that struck out a ton, when you look at the majority of his career. But last year, his strikeout rate spiked from 22.7% to 33.9%. And you can't have that if you're the Cincinnati Reds. Again, if you're a different team in Major League Baseball, you can get away with that a little bit more at the catcher spot. But you have to – the Reds need him to hit. That's just kind of the reality of the situation. I like Tyler Stephenson a lot. He can hit. He has proven he can. Defensively, he's a good player. Certainly blocking balls is great. Is the pop time the best? Throwing out guys, is that the best? Framing, is that the best? Maybe not. But, defensively, he's more than good enough back there, and he's done a really nice job. He's a leader of this team. People made fun of those of us who back Jonathan India and how people would say he's the heartbeat of the team, and then people be like, who cares about that? Like, it's, the production isn't there. I think there is something to be said about being a leader, and you look across this Reds team, you see a lot of youth, and it's Tyler Stephenson feels like the leader of this team. That's they call him QB1, right? That's just kind of what it feels like. And I think if you extended him here at this point, you could get a reasonable number. And I think, being a small market team, he's more than good enough to be your catcher, right? You need some bats certainly around him. Obviously, we understand that. He's got to stay healthy, certainly as well. But I would like Tyler Stephenson to stick around here. And kind of an embarrassment that the Reds are taking this thing to arbitration because it's like $200,000. I believe it's somewhere in that ballpark. It's less than $500,000. I do know that. But just figure it out. Like, what are you doing? Why are you going to arbitration here with Tyler Stephenson? But I think extending him should be on the table. Doesn't look like they're going to, but I think they should absolutely consider it here at this point. And then Trevino, who the Reds extended, I believe, before opening day last year. And we were all kind of like, oh, you got this guy from the Yankees, and then you're already extending him. And then you heard about how great he was in the clubhouse. And you talk about with these catchers kind of like directing a staff, right? Just kind of taking ownership of a pitching staff. And apparently Trevino's done a really nice job of that. If you remember the beginning of the year when Stephenson was hurt and Trevino was hitting, it was like, oh, my God, this guy's great. Right? But the Reds kind of brought him in to be a defensive catcher, and you look at some of his defensive metrics last year, and it's like, well, that's not good enough for a guy that's not going to be a top-of-the-line hitter for us or a top-of-the-line hitter for his position. He's got to be a little bit better on defense. And, I think there's reason to believe he can get back to that point for the Cincinnati Reds. But he's got to show that. I think he's a great option to have as your second catcher. You want Stephenson out there more times than not. But Trevino, he offers some upside. He offers some leadership. And he's got to hit a little bit more. He's got to hit a little bit more for the Cincinnati Reds. But it's also difficult when you're not playing every day to kind of come in there and, can't build that momentum. You're not getting consistent swings. I think it's a difficult position to be in. I've always said that about baseball players, guys that are on like a major league roster, but they're not an everyday player and they're just a bench guy, and you just got to be ready for that one at bat late in the ball game, right? I mean, that's a crazy position to be in, a crazy difficult position to be in because your timing's all thrown off, you're cold, you've been on the bench, and then they'll put you in late, and usually it's a high leverage moment where it's like, okay, we need you to produce here. So that's always the funny thing about baseball, having guys in those spots. But there's a lot of belief. I think that the Reds catchers are in a good spot, but obviously Stephenson's got to hit a little bit more for this team. If he was somewhere else, That wouldn't be asked of him, but here in Cincinnati, it is asked of him. And it seems like, by all accounts, he likes it here and wants to be part of the solution going forward. Again, I think an extension should be on the table, but ultimately we'll see. And then Ben Rortvedt is the final guy here. They picked up off the Dodgers. He's on the 40-man. If something happens to Stephenson or Trevino, which the Reds in spring training, seemingly somebody always gets hurt, so fingers crossed that doesn't happen, but I'm sure his services will be needed at some points. And then kind of just, okay, let's see what you have in that guy. As I mentioned at the top of the segment, Reds are always kind of rolling the dice on guys where it's like, well, the numbers don't look great, the production hasn't been great, but there's some upside here. We believe he can be a good player, and then ultimately you see if that comes true or not. You're seeing that with guys like J.J. Bleday and, of course, the Dane Myers trade as well, which feels like that's going to be kind of a platoon situation. But, low risk, high reward is kind of how the Reds operates, always have, and just kind of the nature of being a small market team in this league. Also of note, Nolan Arenado has been shipped. So, we saw this with the Cardinals kind of unloading a little bit, Sonny Gray earlier in the offseason, and now Arenado is gone. Is he the same player he once was? No, but that dude down at third base can flat out pick it. That guy's unbelievable. I don't know how many Gold Gloves he has off the top of my head, but it is a laundry list. And he's still a really, really good player. He's still a winning player, and he's going to have an opportunity to do that in Arizona. Of course, they made the World Series a couple years back. And, the Cardinals are completely, in a rebuild, which is crazy. It kind of feels like they've been here for a little bit. Still have some success against the Reds, of course, which that needs to change here in 2026. But, they're building for the future. And you would think, just kind of the roster in which it is right now and the moves they made kind of unloading off these contracts, that they shouldn't be very good this year. And that's a team that the Reds need to handle. And for much of my life, that hasn't been the case. But it's different here. This isn't Yadi Molina and Albert Pujols and Lance Berkman and these guys out here, right? This is not a good baseball team. And it's a team that the Reds need to have success against this year if they want to make the postseason and potentially have a chance at winning the division. But when you kind of look at the scope of this division, we talked about the Bregman stuff a little bit yesterday. The Cubs kind of flexing their muscles a little bit, showing that they've got some money. They can throw it around. They can spend it. They add Bregman to that roster. Reed Mouse, of course, has gone on and on about how good he thinks this team is in Chicago, which offensively they got a lot of pieces. They play good defense there as well. I've got lots of questions from a rotation bullpen perspective as it relates to the Chicago Cubs. But, I think going into the year, you kind of look at the Reds in the middle of the pack, right? You look at them and go, boy, that rotation, that's top of the line. And then you look at the bats and you look at where they're at defensively. They should play better defense than they did last year. Yeah, that's the thing. When you spend this money and say, oh, we're going to play really good defense and don't play elite defense, then you just kind of look like an idiot, right? And that's kind of where Cincinnati was last year. I expect them to play better defense this year. And, you hope the guys that we talk about, it's frustrating that they didn't add somebody to this offense yet. And Reed thinks they'll make a signing at some point. Feels like they're kind of out of cash here at this point. Maybe you get a Austin Hayes level signing here to roll forward on opening day, but you need McClain to take a step. You need Noel V. Marte to continue to build. You need Stephenson to get back to that form. You need South Stewart to be good and be good right now. Kind of feels a little bit. Now, I like South Stewart a lot, so don't take this the wrong way, but it feels a little bit like the Shamar Stewart situation. As far as, not picking him, but being a guy where it's like, well, we need him to produce right now, and he's a young kid, and I don't know if you can necessarily count on that. Came up at the end of the year, had some moments in the Dodgers series in the postseason, but they need him to be like a middle-of-the-lineup stud for him, and he's just a kid out there. There's going to be ebbs and flows with his season this year, but they need him to be solid there as well. So there's a lot of things that need to go the Reds' way. I view them kind of as the middle of the pack, but there is a ceiling. I think it's what makes this team intriguing, especially with this rotation. There is a ceiling where they're, celebrating, popping champagne after winning the Central. But unfortunately, there's also a situation where they're kind of in the basement. I don't think Tito would come in last place. Just he would be able to navigate around that. But is there a world where you're, second to last place in this division and missing the playoffs? I think that's a world you live in there as well. So huge year for the Cincinnati Reds. We talk about the Bengals, how their identity is offense, and they want to win with just offense. Well, is the defense good enough? The Reds, their identity is starting pitching, and we saw how good it was last year, and it just barely backdoored them into the playoffs. So, tough to stomach that. That looks like that's going to be their identity going forward. Makes for some quick baseball games. Makes for some, edge-of-your-seat moments where you're sitting there holding on to dear life with a 2-1 lead, or you're behind one run in late innings just needing a hit. Makes for some entertaining baseball. Not as entertaining as, hitting 3-4 home runs a game. But they kind of view as a middle-of-the-pack team here at this point. Cubs, They get Bregman. He'll play third base. He'll hit a lot. If you're the Red Sox, you kind of got to be kicking yourself. I think they were hesitant to waive a no trade clause or to implement that into his contract, and he was just like, all right, I'll just go to Chicago. And Chicago apparently was in the mix kind of this time last year, and then he ultimately decided to go to Boston. But they've got some really good pieces. Counsell, none of us like here in Cincinnati, but he wins a lot of games in the regular season, so the Cubs certainly going to be a threat there as well. But we'll kind of spend some time here as we get closer to pitchers and catchers reporting on the Cincinnati Reds. Bearcats, they're back in action tonight. They play Colorado. They're 7.5-point favorites at home, Fifth Third Arena. And, they're looking to not fall below 500. They lose this game, they're 8-9. And I think Wes is in a world of trouble. I don't know if there's anything that he can do to save his job, which has just got to be a spot that kind of drives you crazy if you're Wes. I think that's why you've seen him snap a little bit. You saw the moment that we talked about with Keegan Nickerson certainly on the show, of him kind of crashing out, as the kids say, on 700 WLW after a game before Dan and Terry could even ask him a question. Then he's got to come out and apologize, right? And then he loses to a ranked team in UCF, solid team. But then after the game, he's like, yeah, it doesn't feel like either team lost the game. No, actually, you lost, Wes. You lost the ball game, and you need to take ownership of that. So this is a huge game for him. And the narrative right now, or the storyline, is that apparently some people are going to show up with brown bags over their head. And there's an account, Barstool Cincinnati put out like, hey, this is what we're doing. Everybody show up to the game at home and put your brown bags on. And, if it's a Barstool affiliated account, sometimes that can gain traction. From what I've gathered, that's the only account that has came out and said this. So in a lot of ways, I think it's much to do about nothing, but I do expect to see some brown bags at the game. But I don't think this is a situation where you pan over to the student section behind the hoop and you just got rows of brown bags. I would be surprised about that. You've seen some alum come out. Nick Van Exel, of course, Bearcat legend. He came out and was like, don't do this. Stick with us, right? This isn't, a way to get this thing fixed. Hang in there. It's tough. It's tough for these players, but show your support. Come out there and help us get this thing turned around. Look, you have your right to do whatever. That's the great part about living in this country. You want to show up to the game with a brown bag? Be my guest. Go ahead and do it. I would not do that. I would not, I got a little bit too much pride to show up to a sporting event and put a brown bag over my head. I would never do that. It does feel a little bit different than doing that to a Bengals game, right? At the end of the day, it is a university. These are kids. They're getting paid millions of dollars. I understand that. But that's just not a good look, right? You're already in a bad spot, and it just kind of directs negative attention towards your university, and I don't think that's going to result in direct change. Is Cunningham and the decision makers here, the board, are they going to see it? Yeah, they're going to see it, but is that going to cause them to make a decision right now? No. I would be shocked if Wes was removed before the end of the year. They're going to give him the year here, I would think. But yeah, it's not something I would do, but you want to do it? Yeah, be my guest. Go out there and do it. It's a game that, and obviously here at the show, talking about Cincinnati sports, I'll watch just because of that. But even if I wasn't talking about this, I would flip it on just to see, right? Because that's going to be a conversation topic on the broadcast. They're going to be talking about it. The camera's going to be panning. I just kind of want to see, well, what's it like? How many people are wearing brown bags? Which I think there will be some. But if it's only a handful of people, that's not, not the end of the world. But it would be a horrible look for Cincinnati if you, like I said, look over in the entire student section has got a brown bag over their head. But from a basketball perspective, Mustafa Cham's got to do a little bit more of that. I think you saw some good things. He's kind of coming to life a little bit here. This was supposed to be kind of a big three situation, which now it's funny that we were talking about it that way. But coming into the year, it's we have this Baba Miller, right, this transfer that's played a lot of basketball at FAU. We got this Mustafa Cham cat that's supposed to be a really good player, could potentially play in the NBA. And then you got this stud freshman in Sean Abayev. And let's rock with these guys. And, Abayev's a freshman. There's growing pains, but Wes has gone away from him at times, not getting the tick in which he got. It's proven that he's a liability on defense, and when the shots aren't falling offensively, then it doesn't do you much out there on the floor. And Cham's a guy that's got a lot of size, a lot of length, but he's shown some, softness out there on the court, and inability to finish at the rim. That's changed in a more positive direction, certainly here over the course of the past few games. And then Baba Miller's got to, he is your best player. And if he doesn't play like your best player, this team's not in a good spot, right? I think maybe we overvalued this roster a little bit coming into the year because, remember, I'm sitting here talking about Day-Day Thomas kind of taking a back seat a little bit. But now if Day-Day Thomas takes a back seat, they don't have a chance, right? So I think maybe we overvalued Baba a little bit, but clearly when the team is without Baba, they don't even have a chance. So he's got to be better. Chom's got to show a little bit more physicality, a little bit more toughness, ability to finish at the rim, right? I need somebody to go out there and, whether it be take a charge or, get involved with some contact or dunk on somebody. Somebody's got to go out there and set the tone here, right? Because if they're going in, if Wes Miller's burning the timeout 2 minutes into this thing and they're down 8-2, there's going to be boo birds all over the place at fifth third, and that's not, energy that you can really build off of if you're Cincinnati. It's imperative they get out to a hot start tonight. It's imperative their best players play like their best players. Chom can build off it. Baba gets back to what he's doing, right? And you got to see more from Abayev, right? I mean, you're in a spot where he's getting paid a lot of money. He's a 5-star recruit. There's high expectations. I understand there's going to be growing pains, but he's got to play better basketball for this team. And then you got to spark off the bench. Jizzle James, starting to get his feet wet a little bit here. This is a game you should win, right? Regardless of the distractions and, the heartbreaking losses or some of the adversity that you have faced at this point, you have a better team than Colorado. You are at home. You are favored. You need to take care of business in this basketball game and try to create a little bit of momentum for yourself in order to keep this thing rolling. Xavier also in action against Butler. I believe Butler's like a 1.5 favorite at the Cintas Center. I'm not a Xavier guy, right? But I watch that Xavier team and I go, the wins that Pitino has, how are they doing that with that team that he rolls out there on the floor? And, I've mentioned this a couple of times on the show. Just imagine if Pitino was coaching the Cats, you have 4 or 5 more wins. Definitely. I don't think that's hyperbolic at all. Pitino's done a tremendous job. Not a lot of funds being allocated towards that roster, but if you watch Xavier, if you're a donor there at Xavier, you're intrigued and you're ready to throw some serious cash towards that program this offseason and kind of building for next year because Pitino's done a great job. It was a home run hire for Xavier, and it looks to be the case. Are they going to be a tournament team? Probably not. Are they a team that's going to even be in the top half of the Big East? No. Right? They've got some serious limitations as far as their size out on the court and just their roster in general. But Pitino's done a tremendous job, and that would be another something to hang his hat on if they're able to beat Butler. Because Butler, they're not great, but they're a better team than Xavier. And if Xavier can take care of business in this game, that would say a lot about what Pitino's been able to do here in a short period of time. Some other college hoops that I want to discuss. Mentioned this at the top. Kansas beats the heck out of Iowa State. Iowa State, Otzelberger, they've done a nice job. I thought last year they would kind of go on a run in the tournament. They kind of cooled off a little bit. They don't score a ton of points, play a lot of defense. Certainly their unit last year did. Kind of in some ways is I don't want to say the poor man's version of Houston, but there's some elements to that Kelvin Sampson-style basketball that they try to play with. But the 2 team in the country, that was absurd, right? That was absurd that they were ranked at that spot. They're going to be a really good team. They can get a top seed in the tournament. They can do some damage in the tournament, but Kansas really flexed their muscles, I think, in this game. Darren Peterson's unbelievable. Kind of the consensus number 1 overall pick here at this point, which I think I would agree with that. He's had some injury issues, ability to stay out on the floor. Also some other just weird stuff where it's he's checking out of a game with cramps. And there was one game where he's looking over to the bench because he's getting ready to get subbed out. And then there's a turnover directly related to that. There's been some of that with these NBA prospects in college. Nate Oates, LeBaron Philon was having some cramps issues, and Nate Oates after the game, I think this was after the Vanderbilt game they lost, and he was not happy. He was I don't know what to say. He had cramps. He only played a certain amount of minutes, and he had cramps, and then he had to leave the game. So with some of these top picks, don't want to go full conspiracy theory mode here, but some weird stuff going on with these NBA guys. Are they, trying to be on a minutes restriction? I don't know. Some weird stuff there, but Barron bounced back in a huge way last night for the Tide and hung 30-plus on Mississippi State and pick up a big win. But Kansas, I think, are they a top team in the country? No, but they're also a team that you go into any game with Bill Self and a healthy Darren Peterson, they can win this game. Right, they can win this game. And I think they're going to pull off some more big wins this year, but I don't view them as a Final Four team. At this point, they were unranked last night when they got the job done. UConn, Hurley continues to do a great job. They're kind of running away with the Big East, I think. St. John's certainly not as good as a lot of us thought coming into this season. UConn beat Seton Hall last night. And the thing about UConn, too, which I think is going to serve them well going forward, those teams that won back-to-back titles, they would just kick the crap out of everybody. And it worked, and they basically dominated the tournament there as well. But the UConn team that lost last year, I don't know if they had faced necessarily as much adversity. Obviously, they didn't win nearly as many games as they were used to. But these aren't easy wins that UConn is dealing with here at this point. These are some tough, fight to the finish, get that experience, and winning close games. And I think that's huge for UConn as, they're a top 5 team in the country. I don't want to sit here and talk about them like they're some underdog. But, this is very valuable, especially as you get closer to February and certainly into March, this experience that they have with these closer games, because they're not just killing everybody like we saw from UConn a couple of years ago. A&M, Tennessee, double overtime thriller. SEC clearly not as good as last year. I don't know if that'll ever happen again, but that's still a good conference. But I think you can make the argument certainly that the Big Ten is the better, deeper conference here at this point in college basketball. Michigan, they lost a couple of days ago, suffered their first loss to Indiana. Came back down to life a little bit. I don't view them in the same light as I view like an Arizona. That Arizona team is absolutely unbelievable. But Big Ten, really, really good in basketball. Purdue, of course, always going to be an issue there as well. And there's some upset ability with Indiana, although they did just get wiped by Izzo, who that's another good team with a lot of experience, guys that have been there with Izzo. It kind of feels like Michigan State could make a run in the tournament a little bit this year as well. But some good college basketball last night. We'll spend more time talking about that going forward here on the show. And a couple of local games tonight, UC and Xavier both in action. And before we move on to this Koepka stuff, Miami Redhawks. They're undefeated, 18-0. I'm not going to sit here and act like they've beat some really good team, but they absolutely should be ranked, right? When you're winning all these games, when you don't have a loss and you're dominating what you're dominating, and just use your eyes, they look really good in the process, you deserve to be ranked. And, I would view it a little bit differently if they hadn't been in spots where, if they were, heavy favorites in every game and then they were beating these teams, fine. But, they've been underdogs in several games and have won. So, according to Vegas, those are big wins, right? And the AP poll is not going to give them that credit. I get it. It's not really, does it mean anything at the end of the day? No, but, I went there. I'm a little biased, right? It's a, smaller team. It's a MAC team. Give them their love. Give them their flowers. They're undefeated. And they look really, really good in the process. And, it's funny. As the time goes on with Miami, Reed and I were talking about this last week, where I'm like, if they don't win the MAC title, MAC tournament, are they getting in? I don't think so. My mind's starting to shift a little bit as it relates to that. We got a long way to go, right? They got a lot of games that they need to play. But, if they only have one loss and then they lose in the MAC tournament, is that still good enough to get them in? Here at this point, you would say no, because they're not even ranked. But I think that could change going forward. And at the end of the day, if they continue to win games, they will be in, or they will be ranked. And it's given them, I'm sure Travis Steele probably likes it, honestly, because it's given them a chip on their shoulder and they're playing with an attitude out there. But if they continue to win, the AP poll will have to give in at some point and rank them. But a great story. Would love if more people could get out to Millett Hall. We'll see if, when they have the new arena, if that will change. We're looking at attendance here, and it's like, they're still not getting anybody in there. I get it. It's Millett. It's old. It's not the most, it's not the greatest venue in the world, certainly, but some more students there would certainly help. I remember, working those games in college, there would be literally 30 students there. That might even be excessive, literally 20 students. Which they're getting more of that now, but there's still a lot of empty seats in Millett Hall, and we'll see if that changes. Hey, go ahead. If you're a Miami person, go out there and show your love for the Redhawks. If I was still up there, I certainly would. All right, let's end here with the PGA Tour. Now, we've teased this a little bit, but we're going to try to bring some golf content into the show. We do golf stuff here at Chatterbox Sports, a little 513 golf. Trace Fowler and Elliot Rearing certainly were a part of a lot of great videos. We had our Chatterbox Challenge. That video aired, and we gave away a ton of money there. So we got some golf content here, and I figured on our show from time to time we're going to talk a little bit about the PGA Tour. And the PGA Tour got some really good news here over the past couple of days. PGA Tour is back back in action tomorrow. That's kind of why we're doing this as far as the timing goes. The tournament at Kapalua, the Tournament of Champions, which always kind of gets things going in January, right? Starts the new year. I've always loved it. And these guys usually shoot like 30 under at these places, and you see a lot of really good players play because it's, the people that won all the events last year. But I don't know if there was some. I had a buddy actually that went out to Hawaii and he was supposed to play Kapalua and then wasn't able to. I don't know if it has something to do with some weather affected the course or if it's just renovations or what exactly went on there. But Kapalua, that tournament wasn't a thing this year. It'll be back next year, I would assume. But the Sony Open, usually everybody plays in that first tournament, then they fly back, get ready for the West Coast swing, and the Sony Open field isn't the same. But a little bit different this year. You're starting to see some more guys be in that field. No Scotty Scheffler, no Rory McIlroy, obviously the two stars of the tour here at this point. But Jordan Spieth will be there. Ben Griffin will be there. Lots of other really solid. Schauffele's not going to be there. But the list is a lot deeper than it typically is at the Sony Open, and looking forward certainly to watching some golf tomorrow. But the big news, Brooks Koepka, he's back. Koepka, of course, left for the LIV Tour, and that whole thing was kind of just a mess. Now, some of these players were bent out of shape about the PGA Tour and, how the tour treated the players, and there was money stuff certainly involved there as well, and it became a whole thing, and obviously lots of guys left for LIV. Now, luckily, none of like Scotty didn't leave, Jordan Spieth didn't leave, Justin Thomas didn't leave, Tiger, of course, didn't leave. But you saw some stars leave. Koepka, certainly one of them. DJ, certainly a star, but he's aging a little bit more. And then Rahm, Cam Smith, and Bryson DeChambeau, obviously, is the big one. But, I kind of felt like this LIV thing, it wasn't going to work out. And we're trending in that direction. Like, LIV might be holding on for one more year, but after this, they're in deep trouble. The Saudis, of course, throwing millions, just a ridiculous amount of money at these players. Credit to guys like Spieth and Scheffler and Thomas who said, no, you know what, I grew up, I wanted to play on the PGA Tour. The best spot for competitive golf is the PGA Tour, regardless, of how much money that you're willing to throw at me. And Koepka was one of those guys. He was frustrated with the tour, and he said, shoot, I'm leaving. And I also think that the money certainly influenced a lot of these guys. I think it certainly influenced Koepka as well, and he made like $165 million over the course of the past few years at LIV. I think it was like 120 is what he got. It was between 100 and 120 was his signing bonus, and then his purse for winning like 5 tournaments with LIV, he got like over $40 million, and you compare it to the wins that he had on the PGA Tour, and he made more at LIV with way less wins. So from a money perspective, yeah, sure, go over there. That's the, I can't. If somebody threw, it's easy for me to sit here and say, oh, I wouldn't do that. Are you kidding me? I would say with the PGA Tour, I have integrity and I want to compete with the best players in the world and the best spot to compete in professional golf. But then it's like, well, here's $120 million. I'd be like, so it's impossible to say what we would do if we were in that spot. But Koepka ultimately leaves. And then, I think he didn't like it, right? He loved the money, I'm sure, but he's like, this isn't real golf, right? We're walking around in shorts. They got these speakers on. We're only playing 54 holes. Yeah, there's some really good players here, some of the best players in the world, but this isn't the best competition. Scotty Scheffler's not out here. Rory McIlroy's not out here. And, he made his money, and I think he's ready to, come back. And credit to the PGA Tour for allowing this to happen. They have this program called the Returning Member Program. And basically, it only allows players that have won a major or the Players' Championship since 2022 to come back. So there's only 4 guys that qualify for this program, as they say. Koepka was one of them. Cam Smith is another one. Jon Rahm and Bryson DeChambeau. Now, they have until the beginning of February, I think February 2nd, to make this decision. The other 3 guys have come out and said that, we're good, we're going to stay with LIV. But that's their way of saying, we don't want all you back, but if we can get our stars back, we'll absolutely bring our stars back. And Koepka comes back. I think that's the right thing. And it's very punitive, the stuff that he has to deal with here. They estimate that he's going to cost himself between like $50 and $85 million. Now, to be clear, that's not them fining him $50 to $85 million. But when you talk about money that you can win from the FedEx Cup, Brooks is not eligible for that, and he also has to donate $5 million to charity, so I guess that directly comes out of his pocket, but they're not fining him $50 to $80 million. They're just saying there's a good chance that he misses out on that over the course of the next several years, and he's got to do it the hard way. Right, these signature events he's got to qualify for. He is not exempt into these events. Now, he's automatically qualified for the 4 majors based on his win at the PGA Championship in 2023. But he's going to have to do this the hard way, and I think that's fun because, some of these guys, especially Rory, I wouldn't expect him to play in a ton of events this year. He's going to play in the signature events, but that'll be good for the tour where it's like these smaller tournaments. Good chance Koepka's going to be out there playing, trying to qualify for these signature events. And this is the absolute right thing to do for the game of golf, right? Golf understands that, we need our stars back. And thank goodness that a bunch of them stayed. But, if you get Koepka and certainly DeChambeau, that's really the needle mover there is Bryson DeChambeau. If you get them back on the tour, you're in a good spot. And they've got new leadership here with the PGA Tour. Monahan's done, and they got some NFL guy in whose name escapes me currently, but he was high up, oversaw a lot of NFL media stuff, oversaw a lot of NFL Network stuff, and he comes in here and he's making the right call along with Tiger Woods and a bunch of these other guys making decisions. But bring an NFL guy in, right? Say what you want. The people out there that say, the NFL's rigged or whatever. The NFL knows what they're doing, right? And say what you want about Roger Goodell. Those guys at the NFL, they absolutely know what they're doing. And, that's what golf needs. They need a little bit of structure, and they need somebody to come in and, bang the table and say, we're going to do it this way, and we're going to do it the right way. And that appears to be the direction that the PGA Tour is going. Koepka's back. That's huge for the tour, and he'll be in action in a couple of weeks. And I think that certainly is exciting. Now, Koepka, he's not one of my favorite players, but like when he was going on his run, winning U.S. Opens and PGA Championships left and right, you're like, yeah, you want to tune in because he was just a killer out there. Now, can he get back to that form? I don't know. I think it would surprise a lot of people if he was able to win on tour this year. Mind you, his year last year was terrible. A couple of years ago, he looked like he had control of the Masters, and then it kind of he kind of lost it a little bit there at the end, certainly to Jon Rahm. But since that point, on a big stage, a major stage, and that was always where he was his best, he really has struggled. And it'll be interesting to see how long it takes him to return to form. But this is the right call, right? I mean, these punishments, this is significant, right? I mean, he's sacrificing a lot. It's not like they're just like, Brooks, it's okay, we forgive you, come on back. No, he's paying. He's paying the price for it, but credit to him for making the decision to come back. Credit to the PGA Tour, their new CEO, Tiger, all the guys for figuring out and getting him back. And, we'll see him in a couple of weeks in California, and that's certainly very exciting. But PGA Tour kicks off tomorrow, and we'll do a little bit of golf content. I know some people don't love that. I'm a big golf PGA Tour guy, so we won't go overboard with it. But, a segment or two a week, I think we can make some time for that. All right, that'll do it for this edition of the show here on a Wednesday. Appreciate everyone, as always, for hanging out with us. If you missed it, it's fine. It'll be in podcast form, our Bengals segment. That'll be out on YouTube later today. As always, follow me on social media at StoneShields_. Follow the show at The Stone Shields. Follow the show on Instagram at The Stone Shield Show as well. Follow Chatterbox at CBox Sports for clips up on our social pages as we continue to grow those as well. We'll be back tomorrow. Have a guest tomorrow. Have a guest Friday. So looking forward to that. But until then, take care, everybody.